So if you struggle with binging, first, know that you're not alone. This is probably the biggest reason why people struggle to get where they want to be with their fitness goals. And there can be a lot of reasons for this. So today I want to talk about some of the biggest reasons I see why people tend to have struggles with binging behavior. And we'll certainly talk about some things you can do to hopefully help, but I think it's important to know why you tend to binge. Otherwise, it's almost impossible to help. But before I get into what I've personally seen myself, I need to be very upfront and clear here. I am not a therapist. I don't specialize in eating disorders, and if this is something you struggle with, I please just beg you to go get the help you need. But otherwise, I hope some of these things I'm going to talk about will be eye-opening and help you out. So one of the most common reasons for binging behavior, in my opinion, is looking at foods as either good or bad. I mean, if you think about it, when do you ever crave anything you can have whenever you want? But if you say that you can't have it, you're almost automatically going to want that because you always want the thing you can't have. And the problem is you may do fine for a while, but willpower won't last forever, and you'll eventually be in a situation where you're gonna have some of this food, whether it's at a party, whether you're having a weak moment, whatever it may be, you're going to have it again. And now if you think that that one food is gonna screw everything up, which I promise you it won't, but if you think that, then once you go off plan, the automatic thought process is, well, I've already screwed it up, so I might as well eat as much of this as I can now because I know my diet's gonna start again, so I better take advantage of this while I still can, and then you end up binging on these foods. And the thing is, I promise, there's no foods that make you fat. I've talked about this extensively in previous videos. I will put a link in the description below about how I think there are no bad foods. But even if you could say there were foods that just magically store as fat, let's just look at it from a different perspective. Even if you had just a small amount of that food and just moved on with your life and that kept you satisfied, that's still gonna be way better than restricting it completely until you get to the point where you're gonna binge and overdo it. This is why I'm such a proponent of flexible dieting, because it gives you the choice. And the fact that it's a choice is bigger than you may realize, because when it's your choice, whether you have that food or not, you can feel okay with that. Whether you want to have it now because you want to be more flexible and you want to enjoy the day or whatever food you're eating, you feel good about that because it's your choice. Or if you choose that you're not going to have it, maybe it's just not the right time. Maybe you feel like you just want to stick with your plan and you know that the food's always available, it's not going anywhere, you can have it at any point for the rest of your life. Now you don't feel like you're missing out and you can feel good about that choice, and it helps you stick to your plan. And honestly, the same kind of goes for almost any other kind of like dieting method or rules that you see, whether that's intermittent fasting or keto or even like a OMAD approach where you only eat one meal a day, whatever it may be. The more rules you put in place, the more restrictive it's gonna feel, and the more you're gonna feel like you screwed everything up when you went off plan, and the more you feel like you need to be perfect with your plan, the more likely you are to rebel against it and end up binging. And a lot of it just comes down to the all or nothing mentality, which kind of comes naturally when you place so many rules on whatever your diet is. Even if you don't think foods are either good or bad, you still may fall into this all or nothing mentality, and you're just never gonna be perfect every single day for the rest of your life, nor do you need to be. But I promise you, if you have the all or nothing mentality, it will always end in nothing. I have literally never seen a single person who has this mentality who doesn't eventually get to the nothing stage. It's gonna happen. So I want you to understand real progress comes from learning to be more flexible, to navigate the ups and downs, to be able to back off when life dictates it, but also when to dial it in when the time is right as well, and not feel like, well, if I can't be perfect, if I can't be 100% on, then there's no point, I might as well do nothing. This all or nothing mentality can carry over into tracking as well. I understand that tracking's not for everybody. You probably know that I'm a proponent of it, and I use it myself and think it's valuable, but what might be the problem if you do struggle with tracking is, once again, this perfectionist mindset. And if you're someone who stresses out about all the tiny little things, whether you should count a diet soda or your BCAAs, or was that slice of cheese 70 calories or 80 calories, oh my gosh, I don't know what it is, I'm gonna screw everything up, but then on the weekends you just have all-out binges and call them cheats and don't worry about that, this is where the problem lies. And you probably have that mentality because you get so caught up in trying to be perfect, you can't do that long term. You feel like you need this break, and it almost sets you up for that binge because you're being way too hyper focused on the little stuff that doesn't even matter. If you think about it, what's going to make a bigger difference down the road? Worrying about if you had 80 grams of broccoli versus 100 grams of broccoli and the 7 calories of difference that would make? Or is having several thousand calories in a cheat meal going to be more harm? I think you're going to be way better off being more flexible with the little stuff and not having the complete blows. This doesn't mean you always have to track, and there aren't times for free meals, untracked meals, and things like that. But the nice thing about tracking is it can teach you how to include foods you enjoy into your diet while still getting results and learning that they're not gonna wreck everything. Having that 200 or 300 calorie donut isn't gonna suddenly make you gain 10 pounds of fat. But having one donut and thinking you screwed up and then having 12 donuts, well, that's gonna make a bigger difference. You still didn't screw everything up. You cannot screw everything up as long as you get back on track, but it's hard to learn how to include these things if you have no idea how much you're eating, so tracking can be helpful for that. Now, another huge reason for binging is the stuff up here, right? It's emotions, and that can be a lot of different things. A lot of times it's something bad happened in your life, something that's stressing you out, and you don't like the way you're feeling, so you want to feel better in the short term. And what do? You turn to food. You eat this food, it makes you feel better in the moment. Of course, it makes you feel worse in the long run, but at that time, it's helping you avoid this feeling that you don't like, and you're using food to suppress those emotions. And sometimes the thought process can be, well, I just don't like what's happening. There's so much out of my control. I need to do this for myself. And of course, it never goes well. But I want to try to challenge your way of thinking here and have you think of it in a different way. Because yes, whenever you get stressed out, whenever bad things happen in your life, it's almost always things that are out of your control. And that's not a great feeling. We don't like that. But what's one thing you do always have control over? Your nutrition, your exercise, this stuff that we always talk about on this channel. And sometimes just by feeling like you have control over something, that can help you feel better. That starts building wins, that starts to build momentum, and that stuff can carry over into other areas of your life. And that's really a bonus tip for you, is always focus on what you have control over. It's not gonna do any good. Worrying about things that you have no control over, stressing about it, is only gonna make things worse. It's not gonna solve anything. So whenever you're in those situations, stop and say, okay, what am I gonna do about it? And then focus on that. If there's nothing you can do, well, then it's time to move on and focus on what you do have control over. If there is something you can do about it, well, then do that. And by sticking with your plan, that can build some pride. That feels good. It always feels good to do the thing you know you should, even when you don't feel like it, especially when you don't feel like it. So always remind yourself that binging on this food isn't gonna make anything better. It's only gonna make things worse. And do the thing that makes yourself proud and watch that carry over into everything else in your life. All right, another big reason for binging behavior that you may not realize is the problem, it's trying to rush the process. I've seen it time and time again. Sometimes things will be going great with somebody's plan. They're being patient, they're seeing good results, but they want to get better results. So they start trying to rush things and they start getting more extreme and they start putting too much pressure on the result. And that starts getting you mentally, because all of a sudden now things aren't going to go as well as you want them to. It starts to feel like, well, it's not worth the effort. And once again, you go back to that all or nothing mentality. You end up binging on things, and then because you binged, you feel like you screwed everything up. Now you're gonna be that much further behind. Now you feel like you need to get even more aggressive and try to make up for what you just did, which only makes things worse, and then you binge even more, and then this cycle continues, and you put yourself way back. You feel like it's unrecoverable, which again, it's not, and it just makes things so much worse. So you gotta slow down. Remember that it has to be a lifestyle. You're gonna have to put in effort for the rest of your life, because the more pressure you put on that result, the worse you're gonna feel, the more mentally drained you're gonna be, and most likely the worse your results are actually gonna be. And the same thing goes with worrying about the future. This is another big one. You get so worried about what's gonna happen. What if it doesn't go as well as I want it to? What if I end up failing? And you get so worried about this stuff that you don't even take action, or you set yourself back pretty much intentionally because you're so worried about it. Whereas, like, again, don't worry about that. Just put in the action, take the results that you're gonna get, whatever they may be, and just be okay with that. And that can be difficult because you probably have something inside of you that you don't even realize exists, but it's this need to remain consistent with the way you see yourself. And if you see yourself as a binge eater, or someone who's trying to lose weight, or whatever you wanna name it, then that's who you think you are. And even if you don't like that about yourself, that's how you view yourself. That's a part of your identity now, and you never like to lose a piece of your identity. So while you think it's like self-sabotage, you're really trying to protect yourself. You're trying to protect yourself against the unknown and what might happen, because that's not who you are, but that's not true. You can always change. Don't use being yourself as pretty much an excuse, and don't use your past to predict your future. Now, another thing that can be a huge issue is too much pressure on body image. And you feel like, well, if I get to a certain weight or a certain body shape, that's when I'll be happy. And you're basically telling yourself in that moment that you don't deserve to be happy with the way you are now. And now, again, you're trying to rush things. So then when you do make some mistakes and have some binges, you put so much pressure on this, panic starts to set in. You want to do even more extreme things. And the whole reason that's happening is because you're so worried about your body and what other people think. And you're terrified of ever gaining any weight. And if you don't get where you want to be, you're never going to be happy. And it's just this vicious cycle that's killing you. So you need to understand that your body isn't what makes you who you are. I think it's great to try to improve yourself, but not at the expense of your happiness. And no matter what weight you're at, no matter what your body looks like, if you put that much pressure on your body image, it pretty much never goes away. You don't get a better body image by getting a better body. You get a better body image by being okay with how you are and allowing yourself to be happy at any size while striving to make improvements. And then all of this kind of comes together with a lot of it can even be hormones, especially if you're someone who's done a lot of dieting, a lot of extreme dieting, you've ran your metabolism into the ground, now your hormones are all messed, your hunger hormones are completely jacked up, so now you're starving all the time. When you do eat, you never feel full. It's hormonally driven. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. This is your body's natural response to this. But it's hard to stop binging if you don't understand this and you're so ravenously hungry all the time. So not dieting all the time and doing what I talk about in terms of going through a reverse, taking it in phases, spending a lot more time not dieting than you do dieting, not only to make things work better when you do diet, but to not always be starving all the time. So make sure you're not over dieting to help control binges. So these are a lot of the common reasons I see. Of course, this is not an exclusive list. There's a lot of reasons for it, and I think the majority of it is mental. But I do want to take a moment to talk about some strategies you may be able to utilize to hopefully help you get over some of this stuff. And the first and most important thing to me is you need to be patient here with making improvements, right? You're not going to have like years worth of binging mentality and then just all of a sudden stop and just be like cured. It doesn't work that way. You're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna have some slip ups. We want to make improvements and have it be less and less over time, but it is gonna take time. So don't judge yourself when you make mistakes. In fact, this could be one of the reasons why you do binge as well, is you place so much judgment on yourself. You make yourself feel terrible when you do have mistakes, and that can just continue that cycle. So no matter what does happen, don't beat yourself up. Don't feel guilty. Be kind to yourself. And you don't want to look back as a way to like beat yourself up, like I said, but I think there's value in looking back when things did happen to try to learn and grow from it. Because one of the biggest differences I see in people who go on to success are the people who don't. They view mistakes and bad results as failures and beat themselves up. The ones who go on to succeed look at failures and mistakes as learning lessons and they grow from it. So look back and go, okay, like what could I have done differently? What was I thinking at that time? How can I get in front of that? What could I have done differently to set myself up for success? How could I have changed things and learn from it? It's fine to make mistakes. You're going to. Like every success of anything in the entire world always comes from lots and lots of failure. People think success is like this just straight line to success, but it's not. It's like failure, 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 like 100 times, and then boom, success. It eventually happens because you keep going, you keep getting a little bit better and a little bit better, you keep learning, and these small changes add up to large changes over time. Another strategy you can take that is helpful for a lot of people is you got to get out of your own head, and you can't do that with your thoughts. So I find talking to yourself out loud, as much as people always think, well, this makes me sound like a crazy person, it's not, and it's helpful. Anything you say in your head, this is all emotion. Everything up here is emotion. And when you're going based off emotions, you're never going to do the right thing. Your emotions are always against you. Those little voices in your head are always against you. And the more you react based on emotion, the worse things are going to go. But when you say it out loud, it now becomes real. It becomes logic instead of emotion. And sometimes, like Gary Vee says, like you just got to get the poison out. Like you keep it to yourself and it just festers and festers and gets worse and worse and worse. But when you say it out loud, it's like you get it out of your system and it helps you feel better and it snaps you out of whatever you're doing at that time. It can be so helpful. So if you're in a position where you feel like you're gonna binge, stop and ask yourself out loud, Am I eating because I'm hungry, or because I'm stressed, or because I'm emotional, or whatever it may be? And when you do this out loud, it can help stop you and keep you from going through that. But if you just try to say it in your head, it's never gonna work. It's too crazy up there. Not an attack on you. I'm talking about the human brain in general. We're always our own worst enemies. And if you just thought about, like, how would I talk to my friend about the situation if this was them, and do that to yourself, things would be a lot different. But it's not going to happen up here. It's got to get out loud. So say it out loud, or if you have a coach, just contact them. Even emailing somebody else, it's still like getting it out, and it still helps you feel better. But if you try to continue to struggle with it on your own, maybe you feel embarrassed or feel like you should be able to get over this yourself, that's not helping. It's making things worse. So don't allow things to continue. Snap yourself out of it. And also, a big one, almost nobody thinks about this, but the chances of you ever ending the binge restrict cycle is almost zero if you restrict every time you binge. So it's not through just ending binging. That's what most people think. You probably think, well, I just have to stop binging. Like, if I just stop binging, then everything will be better. But you're probably not going to stop binging until you stop restricting after the binge. So if you go way off plan and you overdo it and then you try to make that up, that almost always just makes things worse, and you just end up binging again because it feels like you're in this impossible situation. And what's the purpose? There's like no hope. But if you just get back on track and don't try to make that up, now you can just feel good about getting back into things. So it's through ending that restriction that you'll probably end up fixing the binging. Now, of course, you probably have some trigger foods, some foods that you just really struggle with including in your diet. You feel like anytime you have it, you just completely overdo it, and there's just no way you can do it. You got to keep it out of the house. Well, I actually argue against that. In fact, learning to include some of these trigger foods in your diet could be the very thing that helps you create this healthy relationship with food and stop binging. And it's not as impossible as you think, but I already have a video covering this, and this video is long enough already. So make sure you check out this top video next, and I'll talk about some other strategies you can help to include some trigger foods into your diet, as well as helping with ending the binging behavior. Otherwise, I think you'll like this bottom video instead, and I'll see you in one of those other videos.